Alright, hi everyone. My name is Singh. I started this video for mostly for people on Reddit, the R painting sub. Whenever I post any of my palette knife paintings, there's some in the background. Um, I always get questions about how to use the knife, and I thought I would show you guys a little bit of an overview. Even though I made this channel for my students, I think um, it could benefit people who want to experiment with other materials. So you guys can see over here I have two cameras set up. One is for this front facing for my laptop, and over here you guys are going to see this webcam pointing down on my canvas and some paint and just an empty plate. First, let's talk materials. I like to use these palette knives. They say RGM. I guess that's the company, RGM. And mostly I like going for these diamond shapes. These are really cool knives. They flex in a way where it gives you more control without it being super rigid. I know some of the cheaper ones, they're kind of stiff. They don't get to bend like this. So I have a canvas, I have some paint. This is acrylic paint. I usually use oil paint. Let me show you the differences for my knife work. This one is an oil painting, which I probably did in 1 or 2 sessions. You guys can see with oils you can build layers, colors on top of colors, and you can continue to push the depth. With acrylics, which I've been using a lot more lately, you don't have to wait to push it to the darkest darks or the lightest lights. This one I did yesterday. Here you go. It almost looks the same. And this one I did in one sitting. So one thing you guys have to take note of with acrylics is there are different consistencies with the paint itself. Some are a little bit harder to make it flow. Some they flow really well. They spread wide. The one I have, I'm using this kind of paint. It's called Sax. It says True Flow on it, so I don't have to worry about having to use water over and over again for it to spread. That's one of the main things with acrylics. Some comments were asking how can I use it to make it look like oils. Like when they looked at my little footage, they thought it was oils because it was spreading so much, but it's because of the true flow kind of paint. So what I like to do, there's a lot of things to know about how to make a good painting in general. Values, edges, contrast, and all of that. You might hear me mention some of those words, art words, but it's an overview of just how to use the palette knife. So maybe I'll break those down in further videos. But for now, let's talk about the knife. It is really awesome. You guys can use all the different sides of it. You guys can see this sharp side. You can use like this to make lines using just a line. You guys can use the flat side like that. You can use the underside, the tip, and like a drawing. It'll make more sense when I put paint on the canvas. Let's do that. And on the colors I chose, you guys can see, are pretty much these primary colors and then black and white. So I did that for this painting back here too, the one I just showed you guys. I just like sticking with, for demonstration purposes, I like sticking with just a few colors, especially the primaries, because everyone can have access to those main colors. And if you want to get a little bit more complicated, you can mix them up. I have one plate for the colors. The other one I kind of thought I would use for the mixing itself. And these plates, they're not paper, they're like that sheen. They have like a laminated feel to it. You guys can see the way the light is reflecting off of it, which helps the paint stay a little bit wet. It's not going to get absorbed into the plate. So what I want to do first, I always like to do, is cover the space. And I'm just gonna have some fun with it. I love I love thinking about color contrast. Sometimes one of my favorite things to do is filling the whole space with overall cools or grays, and then coming in at the end and finding warm areas to make pop. So it really pushes the contrast in terms of color. You'll have most of it cool and little areas of warm. But while I'm doing that, you guys can see I'm going to mess around with different um, different textures the way I use the knife. And generally you don't want to use the paint right out of the tubes. These colors are sitting there right out of the tubes or the tubs. So I want to make sure that I'm mixing before I'm putting it down. And a little bit of red, that's a nice purplish color. And when I mix too, I don't just take the second color and then plop it in the middle. I like branching out away from that main color, so that way it lets me work on both, okay? And I'm sitting a little bit awkwardly here because I wanted to have both these screens available. So the thing about palette knife painting, you never really want to focus on, at least for me, I don't really plan these things out. I like starting somewhere, and it's like kind of going on a journey. Oh, those are cool colors. So I can use touches of water, just a little bit. Boom, boom. And you guys can see it's already starting to look like some sort of structure. And you can see it, palette knife painting, it actually takes a lot of paint up. So let's do a little bit more here. I want to mix up maybe some darker. Okay, we got kind of like a mid-tone color. Maybe some even darker areas. Boom, boom, boom. You can see I'm using the sides of the painting, the palette knife. Boom, boom, boom. And usually I love starting in the middle because it lets me separate the sky and whatever's going to be in the front here, the ground. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to keep mixing more. This just means I'm trying to talk and paint at the same time. So some things are a little bit out of whack. But this just means I need to be mixing more. If I have to keep going back for the same amount of paint, I'm not mixing enough. You guys can see I'm using different angles, going left and right, boom, boom, boom. And one of the things I always focus on is separation of values, which means usually things in the foreground are going to be darker. As they recede, things get lighter, but also the edges, the separation between the colors back here, it's going to be super soft. You'll see what I mean when I do the background there. Let me just build up kind of like an overall, I guess I'm going with this nice deep blue color. I'm going to add some white. Just want to break up some of that space in the front too. And cool thing about painting with this knife, you can just literally pick up the paint and put it somewhere else. You can scrape it around. So when I have a lot of chunky areas, I like to break them up and use that chunkiness to my advantage to fill up larger areas. I put a little bit of water there to help the flow. Let's get some of that sky filled in. I could do just white, boom, boom, boom. I already have enough paint on that palette knife. So if I put just white, it kind of mixes with the paint that I have. And maybe I want to do a touch of this yellow because it doesn't look like I'm using yellow too much. I'm going to go in here, maybe a touch of that red, so I get like a nice orange back here. Kind of mixing. You can even mix on the canvas itself. I'm going to go back here, push it down. I'm going to start separating some of those, I guess, buildings from the environment. Let's see how it looks. And it is definitely about the process. If it doesn't look good, you can always come back, change it up. Some of these colors are starting to look a little bit muddy. That's okay. I'm gonna go over here. You can see I lost some of my blue there. That's not a problem. I'll come back and get it. And I am demonstrating, so I'm going like super quickly. Usually I would definitely spend an hour, even an hour or two just on this part, establishing the bigger shapes. Boom, boom, boom. And now I can take some of that blue that's right here. I can kind of push up. I don't want so much thickness there. Usually as things are farther, they should not be thick. They shouldn't be having such hard edges, okay? So I want to show kind of the illusion of things receding, illusion of depth. So over here, I want to keep those edges softer and kind of the transitions a little bit more subtle versus something hard edge like this, which means it's closer to us. So I can even, I like using the negative space on the positive space. So in this case, this building right here, or structure, is our positive space, and the environment around it is the negative space. So sometimes I'll go back underneath here, and I will use it to kind of push out and redefine some of the structures. And with palette knife, ooh, that was kind of a mistake. That's okay. With palette knife painting, the textures are what's really beautiful about it. I let them kind of create whatever they need to create. I don't try to force it too much, but I do focus on placing the values in the right place and also the edges. So let's get this little last bit of canvas here filled out. Maybe I can use a bunch of different colors, who cares? Yeah, you guys can see it almost looks like there's like a little hill leading down here, and then it looks like it's the next layer in the background right over here, because I kept those such a soft edge. Okay, so let's see. I want to slow down a little bit. When I go too fast, I can't think about what I'm doing here. Okay, so I'm looking at it from a really weird angle, but on my screen it helps me see it a little bit better. That to me is such a weird shape here. I kind of want to break this up right here. Let's see. I kind of like the subtlety here now. There's not a huge diagonal going down the middle. And over here, that's some chunky paint. Let's see if I can take that blue underneath, push it out a little bit. That's one of my favorite textures to create, actually. If you take the knife, the edge here, and you push up. That looks awesome. I like it. So I have kind of this overall separation of shapes and colors developed here. What I can do now, I can think about maybe there's some darker shapes in here that define buildings. I can add some people. The rest is kind of what you guys would like to add in terms of a narrative. Let's say these are buildings over here. I like taking something like black here. You guys can't see my palette. Here. What if I just took like a super dark blue and red, super dark purplish color, and I went in here. Oh, I don't know if this is going to be a good choice, but let's try it. I went in here, and this kind of helps me push the dimension a little bit. If there's an even darker shape of closer to us, that means these get pushed even farther. So let's try that. I'm just doing sideways strokes. Boom, boom, boom. some on this side, just a little bit. Boom, boom, boom. See those upward textures are awesome. See, I'm just kind of letting that paint blend with itself. Boom, boom, boom. So now it added that second dimension that's super close to us. This whole thing is definitely just about focusing on shapes and where to place them. So that's kind of we have like a super dark area, we have a medium area, and then all the way back here I could even add a subtle area in the distance. So I'm going to take a little bit of blue, since we have white down already. I can even go in here and use that white of the background to imply that there's something way farther, maybe some buildings. I'm just messing around with buildings and architecture right now. And right here, maybe add a little bit more white here, so it doesn't blend in with my mid-ground there, I guess. So that already looks like there's a city all the way down in the distance there. So it's all about edges and values. This is kind of basic. We have these foreground darks, the midground midtones, and then kind of like these softer highlights in the background. And maybe up here, let me see how much time it's been. 17 minutes. Oh, that's kind of long. Up here, I always like to finish by adding some sort of narrative, you know? Sometimes it's person, sometimes it's two people. Maybe there's a man who's carrying a light. I always go to that. It's like one of my favorite things to do. People that carry lanterns or lights, or maybe these are stores over here and they have lights that are lighting up. Something about that warm orange light really speaks to me as a painter. So I could try making a little bit of orange. I love orange, especially when the overall is blue. I love taking the complementary color, which is orange, and going in there. Of course, it's got to fit. It can't be bright orange that doesn't fit into the overall feel of the piece. So if you want to unify colors, one way you can do that, you make that color, you can take some of that blue that you have down overall, mix it in there, and it will be unified a little bit better. So maybe there's some light areas here. I'm just dabbling. I'm not going to really render this out too much. I'm going to just, for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to go kind of quick here. Maybe there's lights on that side. Maybe on this side there's a few. Boom, boom, boom. They definitely could be a little bit warmer with that yellow and a touch of red. Sometimes you may want to wait for it to dry though. You can see the blue is kind of desaturating all my highlights. It's okay. Maybe it looks like there's buildings there. And now, yeah, I want to go a little bit brighter there. Let's try red and yellow again without mixing in a little bit of that blue. There you go. That's a better flame color. So maybe and I'm trying to make the shapes as different and interesting as possible, not the same boxy shapes. So It's all about variety. How do you make some interesting shapes? How do you lead the eye from here to here to here to here, all the way around? This is not like the greatest composition, but I'm just showing you guys. Composition takes a little bit more thought. Okay, and you can see those shapes kind of look like they're just sitting on top of the buildings. So I'm going to go back and just kind of blend in a little bit there. So they're a little bit more unified. I don't want it to look like opaque shapes. Light is not opaque. It's kind of transparent. It's like diffuses into its surroundings. So I can take the colors that I have on the background and kind of let that light blend in there. I don't want huge separation of shapes in the front here that make it look like the lights are solid objects. I want it to look like it's kind of diffusing in there. Yeah, those look mostly green. I probably should have let it dry. That's okay. Right here in the foreground, I'm gonna add a little person. There's a lot of space up here, so whenever there's a lot of space, I like using it. You guys can see I'm using the tip here, just as, let's add some black, just as for the figures here. And maybe, I love people holding lights, so maybe this guy is actually going to be holding light. So I'm trying to do this in like 20 minutes. Generally a good painting takes much more planning and longer, so so let's mix up some nicer, more pure. I want to build up some of the lantern energy he's carrying. We don't want it to be thick. I mean, we don't want it to be hard-edged, so let's put that thickness down and then break it up. I can kind of diffuse it into the air around it, and then I can come back over top and kind of rebuild the light. Maybe a touch of red will help that. And then bright yellow in the middle. Boom. Let's focus on making a better shape there. And think about the light effects. Maybe that light is actually falling on this person. Use this opportunity to define that person further using the light that's bouncing off the clothes. So let's take that light, go in here, oh, that looks like a mess. Let's take some of that dark color again and define the person a little bit better. There you go. Now he's actually popping out against the space. Maybe there's people around him. So if I was going to work on this further, I would definitely let it dry and fix up some of these shapes here. Yeah, feels like I lost that foreground with the darks. Let's try to get that back. A nice dark blue. Because the lights there just kind of overtook. So I can just mix it right back up. The blue and the black. And I can go in here and push around some of those lights. Some areas I'm going to let some of that texture show through. Some areas I'm going to diffuse it a little bit. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah, it's not the greatest painting, but kind of a small breakdown. I can definitely define the people further. I can define the edges further. Some of the light as it's receding over here into the distance. A bunch of things, but I hope this helps you guys see the way I use the knife in all those different ways. Let me go in here. Yeah, definitely. People could use a lot of light, detail, a bunch of things, which it's already 30 minutes into this, so I think I'm just going to stop there. I hope you guys find this useful.